So hardwood cuttings, which I do, it typically is mostly done in the fall, just as stuff starts to go dormant and before bud break, which probably the easiest but take the longest. And it's easy because it's, you know, when a tree's going to go dormant, they don't have any leaves, they're not losing any moisture, so you could basically cut, and when they're dormant, it's time to prune anyways. So you would do like your grapes, figs, we do a lot of roses, you can do a lot of, because it's pruning season for them, and might as well just save the wood and try and propagate them at that point. They take a long time though, and really they don't need as much treatment. Doing them in the cooler months, they're not, you know, it's not hot, they're not needing the moisture, and they're not losing moisture. So you could just basically stick them, cut the stem, dip it in hormone. Hardwood cuttings, we have there's different hormones, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but they'll take a heavier concentration of IBA, which is indobutyric acid. There's different numbers depending on what it is that you're rooting. Other hardwood stuff that you can do, grapes, we do roses. I don't really do a whole lot of I kind of stick to the same stuff. Semi-hardwood is more spring and summer, and that's pretty much more broad. Anything ornamental, it's just, well, going back to hardwood cuttings. Not everything has to be hardwood. Depending on time of year, like our manzanitas, we usually do at the end of the year, and we don't necessarily use hardwood. It's just because they're more difficult to root, that we would take small stems, but treat them the same way as we would a hardwood. Manzanitas, some of the ceanothus, if you're using heavier cuttings, we do in fall, and go heavier on the perlite, which is, you know, one of the mediums that we'll talk about that we use. And of course, using the same higher strength hormone. Semi-hardwood, we do spring and summer, and that's pretty much anything that's actively growing. And we use a medium hormone, and I pretty much tend to stick with mostly the powders. There's a powder, there's a liquid, there's gels, and the liquid, it basically comes as a concentrate, and you can dilute it to any, you know, depending on what it is that you're growing, you can dilute it to any strength you want. The powder comes it's a synthetic auxin hormone, which, you know, it comes in number 1, number 3, and a number 8. So the 1 is what you would use for softwood, early spring. Number 3 is for semi-hardwood, which would be spring through summer, and then number 8 would be softwood. What would be considered softwood? It would be just stuff that's new growth. These I think I did about 3 weeks ago, and they're in. This is the tray that I did it in, and it's up in the greenhouse. These I've been in 3 weeks, and they're new growth, and they already have. You can see they already have roots coming out on them. So this is a ribes. That's the one that's growing out, you know, out in the in bloom right now. So anything that's softwood, if you do it now, your salvias, lavenders, anything in the Lamiaceae family, which is the mint family, which includes the salvias, lavenders, rosemary, thyme, oregano, all the any other plant with the kind of like a square calyx, they're pretty easy to do right now. Verbena, all these. So this is the sage right behind here. That's and that one's got even bigger roots. And so these are about 3 weeks old. So yeah, they're put in there. So the mix that I use to get these in that tray is about, it's heavier on the perlite. It's about 80% perlite to 20% peat moss, and I pretty much kind of stay with that. There's different medias that we use. There's coconut, which is, sometimes I'll use that straight. It's a sterile, organic media. Vermiculite, sometimes I'll use when doing seed, just to kind of top dress it. Vermiculite is a 2-to-1 clay with a positive charge that will hold nutrients when you go start feeding, but will allow a little bit of light in. It holds more moisture than perlite. So perlite is good for drainage. You want your once you have your cuttings, you want to oxygenate. You want everything to drain pretty freely. You don't want anything sitting in water. So that's why I tend to go heavier on the perlite. But you do want to make sure it's damp. You don't want to let it dry out, because then your plants will wither. They'll wilt. And so to do that, we use a mist and try to create as much as possible a greenhouse environment where it's got high humidity. And anything, it could be something simple. It could be, a pot with a plastic bag over the top of it. It could be a little dome. If you have access to a greenhouse, anything will work. But once you do get root initiation, though, you want to try and harden the plants off. You don't want to take them directly from the ideal environment that they're growing in and then take them directly outside. You kind of want to have a transition. I had that, so my little avocado, that's a graft off of the little avocado at the entry of the gate. That is basically, that's 2-part. So when you graft, you have your rootstock, which is the seed. So that would be sexual. You get the seed to germinate, and then you graft the scion, which is the fruiting part. I had that. I grafted it. It's healed over, but I was inside the greenhouse, and it was nice and warm inside, and it got cold, so I put it in. But then 2-3 weeks ago, it got to like in the 80s, and inside it was like 110. So I took it out, and then it froze. So the arbutus at the end, the strawberry tree, anytime you have a tree that's either hardwood or trees that have a big leaf, you want to, if you have an environment where you're going to be growing stuff, and you have your medium, which, like I said, I'm pretty much kind of stuck with an 80-20. Sometimes I even go heavier on the perlite, just barely a little bit of peat moss in it. Anything with a big leaf, you want to take your cutting, and you want to not just take the cutting, but you want to reduce the leaf. So you would cut the cutting and take a small cutting and cut the leaf. So and that'll just reduce the evaporation. So if you take a hardwood, which this would be considered a hardwood cutting, you take off the bottom leaves. I always cut the bottom of the stem at an angle, like a 45-degree angle, and that just kind of opens up the surface area at the bottom. And you probably only need about 2 leaves. So 2, or you could go up a little bit higher, but then these, you would reduce them down to where you kind of cut most of it off, and you just kind of have a little piece left over, and it's kind of looks pretty extreme, but from where the leaf petiole is, you'll have a little node that'll pop out, and then that'll be your new branch. So you would basically take that, you dip it in your hormone, and you would stick it in a tray. And so this tray, basically, I just filled it with soil. It's not the ideal media that I would use. I would basically have it pretty much full with perlite, and I have a pretty funny looking tool that I use it, and it's just to make the little hole, so that when you have a tray of perlite, sometimes it's hard to get a cutting to go in without bending, and if you bend it, sometimes that's all it takes for to lose it. So when you have perlite, and sometimes when you go to especially if it's a softwood cutting, it's just it won't go into the perlite. So I take this and just push it down, and that creates just enough of a little hole that you have pretty much spaced out, and then you just take your cutting and you can make it spaced out however you want. So that's one way that we would do it. Another way is this is another tool that I use. So if I had my tray, and I would take this, you could either use a piece of wood or something that if you're really worried about spacing and having nice neat rows, I would take a piece of wood and then mark like every inch depending on what I was doing, and that would kind of give me a guide of spacing wise with this thing. And then I just go through and I just kind of push down and make a little trench like, and then that I would be able to take my cutting, if it was a softwood or hardwood or semi-hardwood, put it in there. After putting it in the hormone, then I take the back end and then just kind of press it in to get them to pack in there, and then I would go through on the next row and so on and so on. So that's how we do that.
And then if you did that, you would just, like, if you didn't have a greenhouse, you would just like cover it with a plastic bag or something.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's not touchy.
Right. Yeah. You don't want the plastic to touch. If it gets too hot, and if you did that, put it in the shade. Or if you put it somewhere where it's sunny, make sure that you put like a shade cloth over the top of the plastic, because plastic over anything will get really hot and cook. So either put it, I would say it would be safer to put it in a filtered light rather than worrying about putting a shade cloth over the top of it. So these are all basically, so this is what you don't want to do. This is me being lazy and thinking I'm going to save space. Crowding everything, for one, there's a lot of plants that need space, need aeration. If you put them too close together, sometimes they'll just kind of start to, the leaves will get wet. And there's some cuttings, some plants that don't want to be wet on the leaf. So you want to try and wet them initially, but then let the perlite dry out in between. Because then when you have this, and then you're trying to take it out to transplant, we have little tools that we use. You can use a kitchen fork or anything to prop them up, but they're it's matted up to where you can't. I mean, you can't even. I'd rather just toss it than trying to tease the roots apart, because they're just it's too much. When you take a cutting, the tools that you use doesn't really matter. I mean, it as long as they're sharp and they're clean. I've got all different kinds of, for harder wood, for soft stuff. The brand doesn't matter. It's not going to guarantee you success. It just makes sure that they're clean. I just take a little alcohol bottle or wipe and just kind of wipe it down. So sterilization is important. When you use your, I don't have different kinds of trays, but there's plug trays that we use. So they're, using a nursery flat and half flat is one way, but we also, so we have different, we have these alley pots, which are basically it's a sterile mix already, which is nice. You basically just hydrate them. That's what that tray's for. You put water in them. You poke a little hole, and then you put your cutting directly into it, and the roots will come out through this thing, and this is what it looks like. So it's when you're doing plugs, it's a lot easier when it comes time to transplant after they've rooted, because this way you kind of have to tear and break the roots apart. When you have plugs and you pull them out, you just take and transplant. These were not in alley pots, but these are little rose plugs that I basically use a different cell plug tray, and so again it's just convenient to do them that way, but you can use anything. There is some plants that, so we know cuttings, we know softwood, we know semi-hardwood, hardwood, time of doing them, and the hormone that you use is what's going to make the difference. Heat match is not necessary, but it is helpful. The plants, they don't care what the air temperature is, it's just what's down below that is what increases the chance of rooting at the base of the plant. So even if it's winter time, but you're giving them that warmth down below, and you're giving them the environment, you still have a good chance of rooting. Conifers, that's another one that is not necessarily, they're not hardwood, they're just treated as hardwood. So all thuya, the cypress, junipers, anything along that family, I'll take small cuttings like that, but do them at basically in fall and in winter, and treat them as a hardwood, because it's just they just go through that. It's not a dormant period, but it's just give them that time to grow, which I've tried in the warmer months, and they just don't do as well.
I have a question. Do you ever put a hardwood cutting directly in the ground, or do you always start with the pot?
I have done it in the ground. If you do it in the ground, I will try and make I did it with doing a trench with river sand. Just went and just got a load of sand, and basically to where the cutting is it's not going to root right away, but it will drain freely. Maybe even putting pebbles at the bottom, just so that it's not sitting in water. So our perennials, done by cutting, yes. There's some that are, like I said, there are some that are done by seed. There's say a penstemon that if you went and collected seed, it will, it'll probably germinate, but it, done, like I said, growing from seed is you're not guaranteed an identical clone as you would asexually. The Ragdoll method, and so if you have seed and you want to know how viable it is, one way to do it would be to take a paper towel and wet it, but wring it out all the way to where it's damp but not soaking, not where it's dripping out water, and then you put rows of your seed. And I did it with onion seed, and I did 100 seeds in a paper towel, and then rolled them up so that when you go to, this is my test you guys can look at, and it basically, so it starts at over here. I got the percentage of germination, and then this is the days that it took. So day 1, day 2, there was 0% germination. By basically by day 9, I had 92% germinate. So about every I did it every day. I would undo my paper towel, and you can see how dry it is. But basically it's if you have seeds stored for a long time and you don't know if it's good or not, you could do 20 seeds or 30 seeds, and then just kind of figure out what your germination rate is. but that so at the by the 9th day I was at 92%, and I just kind of quit. Okay, well the seed's good.
Well, now, will you plant it?
You can.
Because like if I did it like with an old seed packet,
Uh-huh.
then I wouldn't have any more seeds.
Right.
Right?
Well, if you do, you know, 2 or 3 seeds or 5 seeds,
Yeah.
then you'll know, okay, well, if you get a good germination rate, then you know that the other ones are probably going to be viable. So then you would go ahead and
Plant those too.
Yeah.
the Ragdoll seed test.
I like that.
Yeah, it's fun to do. You know, if you do it with your kids or grandkids or friends, or it's you know, it's fun for them to see it, and they, you know, they can do it pretty easily. And like I said, I did it with cantaloupe that I had. Gosh, it was this really good organic cantaloupe that I got. It was like 6 years ago, and after I harvested a few of the fruit, I saved a lot of the seed, and still, I think on that one I had like 85% germination. And then you know, same thing. I took it outside and just went, too cold, didn't like it. So, question. Yes.
Where does lavender fit into all of this? Is it seed? Is it? Can you?
Lavender, I grow a lot of lavender. It's both, but it's by seed, it's really hard. And so if you have the Stoica variety, which is the Spanish one, that's why there's a lot of them. There's a white, and I have white, I have pink, I have blue, purple. They have a lot of seed, and you know, they'll blow, and then you've got all these little seedlings coming up. And Angustifolias they have seed too, and I did this method on some of the Angustifolias. I had Sharon Roberts, Buena Vista, Hitco, Munstead. They need to go through stratification, which is, you know, basically a cold dormancy. So you would store them. You know, they sell them in the store in seed packets, but whether they've been treated or not treated, hard to tell. I took mine off my plants, and I you know, put them through the cold, and they did pretty good, but they're just really slow. So an easier way would be asexually from softwood cutting. The intermediates, which are the bigger ones, the Grosso, Provence. This is Provence, and this is Provence. So these are vegetative cuttings. The seed is sterile, so don't even try it.
Okay.
So if you want, you know, one of the intermediates, softwood cuttings, they'll do okay with semi-hardwood. Hardwood, you'll get them. They take a lot longer. You think you're going to get a more instant, bigger, robust plant more quickly, but you're better off doing a soft vegetative cutting. This is a dentata, a French, and this was, again, you know, roots, you know, in just a few weeks. So they're pretty easy to do right now. So
Right now would be a good time
Yeah.
then, seasonally, or?
yeah.
Okay.
Cuttings. Yeah. So these, you know, even from a cutting that's already rooted, you can cut it from here and use this stem. So if I wanted to, you know, say this was a plant that I really liked and I didn't have mother plant or something, if you cut it from there, then you could take these bottom leaves off, do my little angle cut, dip it in a number 1, number 3 hormone, and then put it in, you know, and that's it. Just water it.
Made another one.
Just made another one. And then and that also helps this, because when every cut that you make, you encourage for the new little stems to, you know, basically it'll multiply. So from every cut, you're multiplying your plants, but you're also getting this to promote new growth in both directions. So you'll get a bushier plant.
So
Some stuff will be pretty easy to do from softwood, which is the tip cutting, and some stuff, if it's too soft, and so softwood cuttings are probably the easiest, but they're also the easiest to lose. They take pretty quick, but you want to make sure that when you do take them, try and take them as early in the morning as possible when they have all their moisture. If you cut them and you don't put them in a Ziploc bag or something that's going to keep them alive for a while, they'll just wilt pretty quick. So you want to almost have your tray ready, go out and collect your cuttings, and then be able to just stick them in right away, because they will they're just more prone to, you're more likely to lose them that way. Are pretty easy. I would say semi-hardwood, and if you have a greenhouse-like environment, you can pretty much do them all year. And it doesn't matter if it's fruiting or fruitless olives. They're all the same genus, Olea. So you can pretty much do any one. I typically, I think the only one that I heard had to be grafted was the Kalamata, the Greek olive. I've seen it grafted. I don't know if it has to be. I actually asked a propagation teacher at Cuesta, and he said that, being the same genus, it should come true. I haven't tried it yet. I don't know why, commercially all the ones I've seen are grafted, and it would be grafted onto a fruitless variety that is, that would be compatible. So.
I have a similar question about your roses. I know all of the roses that I have are grafted. Do you have success just propagating?
Yeah, so the roses are either these would be called own root roses, which is basically you would take a cutting from a rose that you have. These are carpet roses. These are pink carpets. These are red, and then the other ones are pink. So you would take a cutting, and that would be your own root rose. The commercially, what you buy, hybrid tea roses are grafted, and they're budded. So it would be it wouldn't be a cleft graft like what you did with your apples. It would be a tea bud, which all you would use is just the bud of the rose itself, and you would graft onto the rootstock the same way, but they're budded when the tree is, or when the plant is slipping, which inside the bark is the so you know what are the two conductors inside a plant? Xylem and phloem. So one is so you have your xylem and your phloem, which is your food, your nutrient and water, and then you have the too many things trying to think of. So the vascular cambium is right inside, and that's so when you're gonna go to bud, and which spring and summer is when you do your budding, and whether it be roses or your fruit trees, if you make your tea shape and you have a budding knife or anything that you peel apart, it should be wet inside, and that's when you would do your roses. So if you have a sucker coming out from your rose, you could either cut it off, or you could use that to bud another rose onto, or you could take that, root it, because it basically is your rootstock, root that, and then graft another variety on it. And you could do that with your apples too. So apples are, they'll tell you don't, anything that comes up below the graft union, get rid of it. But yeah, you can do that because it's basically feeding off the nutrients that you're giving the scion, which is what you want to grow. What you can do is you can mound soil up, and those shoots will form roots, and then you could cut them off and use those as new rootstock to graft more apple trees if you want to, So yeah, you could get an orchard out of it. Anybody else?
So you've grown in perlite. So what's the next step? Do you put it in a larger pot with potting soil in it, or what would you do?
So
at that
yes,
point?
so from a cutting like this, we would go into this size pot, and then at this point we will add soil, and then you could start feeding it. So sometimes you'll have a tray that looks like they're all these aren't rooted. These are there are some of these where these guys came from, but people sometimes they'll get impatient. They'll want to try and start tugging at stuff. Sometimes it looks like they're growing, and if they look like they're growing and they're still up, you can gently just touch them, and if there's any kind of resistance, then it's probably starting to root. Like I said, the salvias are, you could feel when it's kind of, so there it is. So you really want to try and, like this, technically I should have put a date and what I put in here, because it's just kind of a mix of everything, but that'll you can use that as a guide of how long it's been, and you kind of you'll get a feel of how long stuff usually takes to root.
So will they be rooting at different times, or is that
Yeah.
because they're all soft cuttings, they'll kind of root at the same time?
Not necessarily. Here we have leucospermums that sometimes can take up to 6 months, and so that's another thing you don't want to do. You want to try and keep similar plants together so that you're not disturbing the rest of them, or so that either that or there are some plants that like water, some plants don't like as much, and how are you going to water this whole tray without watering the ones that don't want it? So you want to try and kind of group like plants together. Like I said, this would be a hardwood, and when it's hard, it's basically matured, and a reputable grower one time, I asked him, I said, well, how, what makes it different? He said, well, do a snap test, and what that means is if you bend this and you hear a snap, that means it's a hardwood. It's mature, but like I said, sometimes like the conifers, you would treat them as a hardwood, but I wouldn't use an actual that hard of a part of it.
So is there a chart for the rooting hormones? I know you.
So yeah, so basically they're auxins. This is a number 3, and it'll usually tell you in the back, for hardwood or what it would be for. Number 1, number 3s. There's the gel. There's the powder. So perlite is basically it's a volcanic glass that has been heated to 1600 degrees, and then it pops, and so it under a microscope you would be able to see that the very inside of it doesn't hold a lot of water. It basically just kind of drains right through. It does hold a little bit of water on the outside, so that's why we use it, and because it's not very dense, it allows for air pockets. Peat moss is what I use in combination with that, and peat moss is another organic media. It is acidic. It's like a 3 on the scale of acidity. So the good thing about it is because it is acidic, it's a natural antifungal.
Leonel, the way you handle them, just kind of pulling them in and out, looking at them, is that because you're teaching us, or is that okay for them to be?
They're okay. They're not. Some of them, and again, knowing the plants like the leucodendrons, all the proteaceae, they have really fragile roots that they can sit in a tray for a long time, and the bottom of them will get this big callus, and the root will come from around the callus, and they'll shoot out this root that you have to be really, I mean, it takes a long time to get them to root, and they can tear very easily. So you have to, so kind of knowing, from just working with different plants for so long, how to. Then there's these little grow bags that you can directly, and this little mesh bag is very similar to the Elipot, and the Elipot, they're really easy to use. Sandra helped me with getting the Elipots. They go in the trays, and then so basically the roots, as we saw, grow right through the mesh, and in the cells, they allow for like airspace in between, so they're not always saturated. I guess that's by design. It was intended to be that way, so that they do have air to kind of dry it out in between waterings, but the roots will grow right through the Elipot itself, and makes them really easy to transplant. Culture, there's a nursery up north that is doing, I think it's almond trees in the Elipots, and they're just thousands and thousands of really, really, really neat way to do it.
Where do you find those to purchase?
So you can,
I'm
there's
sure
different.
They'll be in some.
Yeah, so some of the
greenhouse
hydroponic
mega
stores
store.
and are we time?
3 minutes?
Okay. So it's,
Home Depot carries them. I just bought some last month.
Oh, really?
How do you spell it?
wow.
It came with a tray, and I'm growing lettuce in my backyard in a tray.
Okay.
But yeah, it's those exact things there.
And how do you
Wow.
spell that?
ELLE.
ELLEPOT.
Oh, Elipot.
Yeah. Yeah. There's different ones. There's some like little, almost rubber-like little cubes. There's the
Oasis.
Oasis.
another
Yeah.
Type of stabilized media.
Uh-huh.
But the good thing is that then you see the roots before so you're not pulling it out and like ripping off
Right.
the one root that was there and then sticking it back in and helping it roots again. You actually see the roots, so you know it's rooted.
Is the mesh bag a similar situation? You just put dirt and a seed in it or something?
Yeah, so you basically fill it with your medium. You put your cutting into it, and you don't have to disturb it. They're biodegradable, so you would just sink it in the ground or transplant it into a pot, and the same thing. The roots would grow right through it.
And you
And
can
that-
see.
Go ahead.
Yep.
No, just that one that you were showing. It looks to me like it's like a little bit root bound, but you just throw it in and it just goes into
This?
the root. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
that's
like
not.
it that way.
Oh, do you? Oh, I mean.
No, because I would probably like try to.
Oh yeah. No, because when they come with, this is a 128 cell tray, and this is a 72, so this would fit into a tray that's much smaller cells than this, but it's pretty tight in there. So the roots would kind of bound up, but I mean it'll still grow. But I would take this plant and just cut it way down here or even lower and just let new sprouts.
Oh,
come
you
in.
would.
So it'll still. I mean it's still viable. It's
Yeah,
just
that's what I wondered.
not.
They'll grow through it.
Yeah.
The roots will grow. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a smoke bush, Cotinus, that was grown in an Elipot, and I told Kathy a story. So we did these 2 years ago, and there was somebody helping us, and so I did hardwood cuttings, and so hardwood cuttings, as we said, they're dormant, right? They're deciduous. And I had a tray full of all these Cotinus, and they were all in a tray, and a lot of them had already rooted, but they're still dormant. They're still just deciduous plants. And I came back one day, what happened to the Cotinus, tray of Cotinus? And he's not here, and I won't say his name, but he said, well, I thought I was going to help and throw out all the garbage. I saw all these sticks in there, so I yanked them out. He thought they were dead. So you just want to know what it is. There's that story.
So, Paula was asking me where you buy your tea bags. could you actually use tea bags?
That's a good question.
That is a very good question.
Ah,
Because they make some good ones, you know, good coffee ones.
ah.
Coffee, could you
Like a
take
filter,
those out?
I think they would work.
Wow.
You could probably take like a coffee filter and,
Pots, you know, like
oh, yeah. And I mean, even if you did take like a fabric like that, maybe staple the sides, or you know, or if they come in that, you know, a cone shape already. I don't remember where. I mean, this has been a long time, and I ordered a pack of 500, and they're all different sizes. So there's, you know, some. I think these two are the same, but there's, you know, then there's plastic bags, which I got, you know, several hundred bags of different sizes.
Okay.
Amazon.
I think it's online somewhere. Yeah, so just look for mesh